Move on to deficit updates. Always, this is the time of year where things are changing rapidly, influx, and then we did an exercise with our district leadership team, and people know that includes our principals, our managers, and our directors, and we'll turn a little bit of that information and give you some updates about our next steps with balancing. Okay, so who's plugged in? Okay.
Aaron is plugged in. Now keep in mind, this is as of Saturday, things I knew, so anything that happened the rest of Saturday, Sunday, or,
A lifetime.
I know, it is a bit of a lifetime. But a recognition that, normally with federal grants, being roughly 4 to 5% of our total budget, and historically, there has been a lot of consistency in those grants. Our three largest grants are Title I, Nutrition Services, and IDEA, Special Education. So normally we wait, expect to see a minor increase in those major programs. Well, this year is gonna have some lack of knowledge, I guess. I have talked to some districts who have already had delays if you are on what's called impacted lands. Either you have a tribe or military base, they're getting delays in impact aid. Federal Head Start is the federal equal to our ECAP. So again, early childhood education program. So some have Head Start, some have ECAP. We have ECAP, so we're not impacted, but I know there's some delays in Head Start. Cash in lieu commodities is, I think, 2 districts in the entire state, but that is a USDA program, so that makes me a little bit nervous. So we will keep an eye out for any of those that will impact both the current and the future.
I mean, I guess we are being impacted by, through, if you recall, we had an AIR project ongoing in the district where they were doing some work with special education students transitioning and job placement, training, etc. And they have AIR was notified that they will not receive any more funding and should not pay out on these grants after February 10th. And so they notified us. So we will be releasing those employees and stopping that project.
And that's how fast things change, because again.
The programs, and the title of the program was
I'll give you some more information about it, but that's kind of, we just found that out, so we were notified yesterday.
Yeah, so 2 days later and, right.
We're keeping the employees on through Friday and letting them wrap some things up. That's coming out Thursday, sorry. That's coming out of our funds, so it's just 3 people, just so that they can wrap some things up.
Okay, I believe you've heard that the state still anticipates a 4-year shortfall between 10 and 12 billion. So that will impact some of the good work that they could do for schools. Caseload Forecast Council, that's when they decide, oh gosh, how much enrollment do we project for all K-12 schools? How much, caseload, all things equal, but the variables that are not subject to revenues, I guess, or economic revenue indicators, things like what they call maintenance level. So that's coming up. Economic Revenue Forecast Council, they're the ones who have indicated some of this shortfall in 4 years. So they will provide an update in mid-March. Hopefully a little bit better, but I doubt it's 10 to 12 billion. So that that total state shortfall impacts what they can do for K-12. Okay, so I believe these bills were heard today. Again, I wasn't able to listen, so I don't know. I think today would have just been testimony rather than any outcomes. And again, since everything's so dependent on state funding, I don't really anticipate to kind of get an answer on these until mid-March. But it doesn't, all these bills in various ways do some good things. Preschool students don't get basic education because they're under kindergarten age. And so historically, the state has given us 115% of the special ed allocation, then raised it to 120%. This would raise it to about 163%. Because our basic ed and special ed, school age children get both the general ed and the special ed funding. Preschool does not get basic ed. We have students, they're sometimes called tiers 1 and 2, sometimes called least restrictive environment 1, least restrictive environment 2. It's the amount of time that a special education student spends in general education. They're funded differently. Some of these bills propose that they're funded the same, at the same rate. But all of these bills increase them at some level from their current levels. And that would increase our funding by $1.5 million in one of the bills, up to $9 million a year in one of the bills. Again, I'm not super optimistic about $9 million. I hope that the state increases the multipliers over time. I hope for a minimum of $1.5 million. And we won't know for at least another month. So the bills, they have been raising the special education cap, the number of students that they will fund. For a very long time, it was at 12.7% of the general ed. It is currently at 16%. But we are under that threshold, so we're not losing any state funding because we are not over the cap at this time. But raising the cap does not hurt us in the future in case our percentage grows.
The only things I would add about this is, it's an important talking point that we're taking a lot of local dollars from our levy to support special education. And we do that because we need to support those students' education and their acquisition of skills and knowledge. This wouldn't mean we have $1.5 to $9 million more to spend on special education. It would mean that we are reducing our reliance on the local levy, and therefore having those funds to spend on other things.
Okay, material supplies and operating costs, known as MSOCs. There's some bills out there. One increases the allocation by approximately 10%. It is a little bit nerve-wracking that they keep adding additional reporting requirements. There's, some disbelief among legislators that they want to make sure that we're spending it on materials and not salaries. The reporting requirements are in 8 categories. What's interesting is one of those categories is not insurance, which is, a large bill. But we could do that. We can certainly report if it goes through.
Lydia, are you saying that the money then is not supposed to be used for insurance because it's not one? No. It's just they're not even recognizing that as what.
They don't call it out separately.
Even though it's a huge piece.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
So
it doesn't keep us from not spending it on that.
No, not at all. As long as you're not spending it on labor, yes. Because I recognize on one hand, there's no way to start slicing the categories to everything that a district spends on, but they do single out, utilities, so I'm kind of surprised that they don't, but, no, it would not prevent us, it would help us. Currently, they look at our full-time equivalent student enrollment, which again changes slightly every month, to fund the MSOCs. This would be what was the previous 3 years, so 23, 24, 22, 23, 21, 22, an average would fund 24, 25, for instance. So since we have really pretty stable enrollment, that wouldn't hurt us very much. It could hurt some other districts. The best thing about both these bills is they define what inflation is for material supplies and operating costs going forward. So right now, inflation for MSOS is whatever the legislature says it is. It's not tied to anything. So when the implicit price deflator for wage increases has been, say, 3.7, MSOCs might be increased by 2%. And the 2% has not been tied to anything. So we never have any idea what to expect. So both of these bills tie future MSOC increases to an inflationary factor that is recognized, probably would be IPD. And then House Bill 1338 would say, hey, are we keeping up with inflation the way we're doing this? Is inflation for MSOCs higher than the IPD, or is the IPD working? So they would check it every 4 years, which is also a good thing.
Lydia, on those reporting requirements, were those amendments, or was that in the original bill? You know? Just thinking about the possibility of.
I don't know.
Okay.
So they haven't identified which inflationary indicator they're gonna tie to yet?
They are hinting at IPD, which is the same as the salary increases, so while we would love CPI because it's higher, we'd be happy with IPD. And the stability of knowing what it is would be really helpful. Because right now, we don't know until the legislature finishes. And then they'll pick 1%, you're like, what was that? What does that relate to? We have to buy a lot of things, but okay, transportation. Transportation has the most complicated funding model in all of school district finances. So these bills would require OSPI to do an analysis and then develop a new funding model, but after the analysis deadline, the funding model deadline is not indicated.
But they're talking about just the funding model for transportation.
Yes,
Not the overall funding model.
just transportation. They would provide an initial $400 per McKinney-Vento student. That's not very much. I mean, everything is helpful, but really we would be disappointed if this was funded and say special ed or MSOCs were not. It doesn't help a lot.
I think we should emphasize the final point there that, actually, we've been basically holding our own in transportation, fairly cost neutral, but we do expect that not to continue to be the case without reduction in rates and services, in the near, future, which is to say next year.
Yes.
So
there, one of the big challenges, of course, is transportation, very complicated funding model. We know for most programs, basic education, they balance up to our actual enrollment in January. We don't get our transportation allocation until late February. So I can't tell you right now if there's going to be a shortfall in transportation. If our budgeted revenues come in where we've estimated, then we probably will be short. If they come in lower, we'll definitely be short. If they come in a little bit higher, maybe we'll live within our means. But again, it's just getting harder because funding isn't keeping up with costs. Okay, a lot of talk about changes to the educational programs and operations levy. One of those bills would increase the amount per pupil that the calculation is based on, which would help us. And one of the other bill would go back to the pre-McCleary model, which is the levy is calculated as a percentage of previous year's state and certain federal revenues. Both of those would allow us to collect our full voter authorization in calendar year 2026. Currently, we don't have a levy authorization for 2027. We would be running a new EPNO 4-year measure as planned in February 2026. But this would definitely help our district. And one of our frustrations of our community is why are you reducing budgets when we gave you voter authorization to collect more, and we say, well, it's capped at the lowest of a per pupil rate, voter authorization, or assessed valuation, and the per pupil rate is the lowest. So this per pupil rate would raise it up to our voter authorization, as well as the previous year's revenues would raise it up to the voter authorization.
And I should say, one of the pieces of information as we've talked to legislators that we've said is this costs the state nothing. This gives more money out there for communities to help their students, and the more we can remind them, yeah, you're screaming, you have a deficit, you don't have money, but there's money there, our community wants to spend it. It doesn't cost the state anything to do this. It seemed like they were more positive about this than they've been in the past.
And today in the webinar you were there, is at least maybe some of the other cabinet members listen as well. In the superintendent Raydahl update to the state, his concern is absent additional levy equalization funds for districts who can't pass that much levy authorization, or who have much lower property valuations where they would have to have $10 per thousand to get to the same rate as us, that the legislature will be putting themselves right back into a McCleary situation, where they may be, sued again because they're allowing disproportionate collections.
Well, they're gonna be sued one way or another, probably, so.
But I mean, the part of this that could cost them is if they do something with levy equalization, which both were slashed by McCleary, to be fair. It's not just us being, not able to collect everything. Other districts lost a lot of LEA. So that was his point, that they should think about both sides. The legislature should think about both sides of this.
Thanks, Chris.
One of the interesting things is our last full pre-McCleary levy, I think was 2018, it was 66 million. We still haven't quite caught up. We're still under the 66 million that it was back in, I believe, calendar year 18. Getting there, but yeah. And there is lots of discussion about new bills that sound great to someone, but always between workload or true cost to do the work. Hiring labor. For instance, I think that doing vision and hearing screenings is a fantastic thing for kids. I think a lot of parents don't have opportunities to do that. This is an older law, not a new law. I think it's great for kids, helps them be successful. Guess what? That was one of those laws that was passed. No money attached to it. So you have to hire the people who can actually do the vision and hearing screenings and the follow-up and the paperwork. And again, fantastic for kids, but when we pass these bills, we need to recognize we need more funding. And we can't do it all.
Is there any list of all of the bills that are out there that we would put under unfunded mandate title?
There was like 15, 20 years ago, and people, they just have been coming in fast and furious.
Yeah, but I don't mean current bills that we are already are given to us, but I mean bills that are sitting there now going through the session.
I haven't seen anything.
I can check if Chris is.
It's, so in, Dan Steele tracks bills, and I see them, flurrying around. It's just time. It's just trying to like, what would this mean to us? So people just haven't had much time.
And sometimes, as we all know, the cost can really come in the details.
Yeah.
Like it might be, like how much, if we think about the one where we say we were gonna have to track that in 8 categories, might be not much, or it might be a lot. The lunch, and there are things that aren't bills either, like the 30-minute lunch, 30 minutes seated, 20 minutes seated lunch, I'm exaggerating now, 20 minutes seated lunch, which is not a bill, it's rulemaking from OSPI regarding an RCW, but it could cost us a lot of money, and we just have to watch for those things. So it's not just the bills, it could be other things as well.
Well, we did use as an example with the legislators that we've just talked to, the bill to make financial literacy a grad requirement. And we said we value it, we make it an elective, we offer it, but don't give us another grad requirement without fully funding it. And that's just, we said it, and that's an example. And a couple of them said, we hadn't thought about it like that. So just sort of, they need reminding that if they don't live in a district, they don't know how much these things can cost. It sounds so lovely, yeah, kids should be financially literate, but make sure we can give them basic education first, because the money we need for that.
And you have, things coming from other entities. For instance, we're not opposed to the Clean Buildings Act in theory, but it can potentially cost a lot of money, and districts without any capital funds could have to completely shut in. So, all right, do I have any happy notes before we move on?
I'm digging deep, I can't think of any happy notes necessarily.
All right, well, here we go. Okay. This draft of budget impacts is as of today, everything I think I know through today. I apologize, the right-hand side, the revenues are right. Under the current method of the levy, we anticipate an increase of $2 million. Now, again, if the one of the levy bills goes through, that would be higher. Remember, we had a lot of carryover reductions going into this fiscal year, and a carryover reduction really is, we had this assigned and we moved it to unassigned, okay? So it's still in the total fund balance, but it left the assigned to schools, assigned to professional development, moved to unassigned once it's moved, it can't be moved again, it's just there. Enrollment, we talked about roughly 50 FTE. There is a corresponding offset on the left-hand side to expenditures. That's just kind of a quick calculation. It all depends on where the kids land, really, on how we staff. So the 330,000 reduction to staffing because of the enrollment reduction is an estimate. Could be more, could be less. The implicit price deflator is used as a wage allocation increase by the state. They're currently projecting 2.4%. And we have just exceeded $1 million per percent rough estimate. So we passed the state allocation of 2.4% on to our labor groups, but they don't fund all positions, they don't fund all costs, so therefore it costs us $2.5 million out of pocket. Now, what you normally think of as pocket is perhaps the levy. You can see just quickly that the IPD costs exceed even our levy increase under the old system, and that's before we do anything else. Our staff has continued to get more senior, and so I took a look at our teachers' average education and years of experience. Sometimes a district will see retirements, resignations, and that experience in education goes down a bit. We still are increasing. So I looked at our last 2 years of increases and said, if we have the average of the last 2 increases, people getting another year of experience, some more education, then it would, with benefits, cost us about $2.3 million. And that is not anything that we can manage very well.
Wait, EEA potential rollover to 1.5. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you said 2.3.
Oh, I'm sorry, I moved on to the next line because my eyes are tired. My apologies, I should wear glasses. You are correct. EEA potential roll-ups are about 1.5. Then we looked at, in the other contracts, we have what's called midpoints so that other labor groups can stay competitive with districts in the region. Essentially that our salaries for like positions are, kind of in the middle of the group. Historically, like the last couple of years, our midpoints for other groups have been around 2.3 million. Any questions so far before I keep talking? Okay, the line in pink, negotiated contract increases. So the deficit that we have does not have any bargaining. Library materials restoration. Last year when we cut the $10 per student library materials allocation, we indicated that we would restore them in 25-26. That is the cost of the restoration, district-wide. The next section is the furlough days and any professional development reductions that were given up by the various groups that you see here. Those all have MOUs that expire August 31st or June 30th of this year. So in order for them to continue, they would have to be renegotiated, if so willing. Remember, we suggested that we are going to delay curriculum adoptions after the math adoption has been done this year. So the difference in budget is predominantly that math adoption not happening or not being replicated with another topic. The budgets are indicating, an employer retirement rate reduction. So Department of Revenue Systems reviews how are we funded? Do we need to charge employees and employers more to support the retirement plans? Right now, they're suggesting about a 1% decrease to employers. So even though they fund us less, we also pay much less. Kind of an inverse of that IPD. That makes sense?
And every time we get a bit of good news, then it's followed on the heels of insurance premiums.
Yes, so that's my expected, insurance premium increase, consistent with, unfortunately, the last several years. What's happening in the insurance world is, hurricanes in Florida affect all of us in the United States. Fires in California affect all of us in the United States. It's, the reinsurers, in order to take on the risk, of everything going on in the liability world, property and liability, increase their rates. In fact, I was complaining about, car insurance and they're like, you know, nothing has changed for you in your driving world. You just, car insurance just keeps going up. No, I haven't had an accident, knock on wood. So similar to that, it's, you know, they do look at our claims, but the risk pool insures up to a certain level and the reinsurers come through. So what the risk pool did was, in order to get better rates, they went from one reinsurer to 20 who are willing to take those levels. Because the one insurer could raise the premium to anything, and with 20, you have a bit of competition, but again, it's still a premium.
You think it would be significant more if they hadn't done that?
Yes. Yes.
So good, that's good
They
news.
try, but it's hard.
I'm looking
Yes.
for some.
Yes. We'll have a, board election. We do have a budget in there now. Yeah, just a mild increase, or relatively mild increase.
So what does that cover? What does that cover?
Your, Snohomish County charges us, a proportionate share of election costs. So when, board members run in the November election, they say, who in the county was running any sort of measure in November, how much did it cost us county to run this, and now we will bill you all.
That's why it's a little cheaper if we're running the levy at the same time somebody else is running something. Because we share the cost with them, it's a little more expensive if we go out by ourselves.
Yeah. Interesting.
Always pay for our elections.
Yeah, and it's, again, it's not funded. You just, thou shalt, you know, what's regulated is board member terms, and that's all good, and then the county can't afford it, they don't get any funding, so they spread it to us, but, yeah. Family medical leave premium, is going up from, point 0074
I have my glasses on.
to 0.0092, effective, last month, January. So there's going to be an increase in spending in 24-25. I extrapolated from the last 4 months of expenditures and said I had a whole year's extra cost, employer cost, that's how much it would be. SEB is not an actual increase, it's a catch-up to what we're really paying. So several years ago, the state, another unfunded mandate or poorly funded mandate, indicated that substitutes who work in excess of 630 hours a year receive a medical or a health as any regular employee. We are up to $1.1 million paying for those benefits. So again, great for people, not funded by the state and mandated by the state.
And to be clear, like many of these things, you know, we are not opposed to that. We don't think that's a bad thing.
Right.
It just causes us to take a hit on our budget.
Yeah, none of this is bad things, right? It's just.
Right. Right. So, in accordance with board policy, when we increase expenditures, we increase the amount that should go into fund balance. That's at $326,000 in the blue. So right now, estimating an $8.5 million budget shortfall. And again, that's before Harvey.
So I have a question about state revenue. I remember when laws were passed in terms of the lottery and in terms of the sale of cannabis, that money was supposed to go to education. Does any of it go to education?
Lottery went away a long time ago.
Was that the way the law was written, that it would go to education for only a short time?
That I don't know. I just remember that when Initiative 728, which was passed in 2001, also known as Student Achievement Funds. Student Achievement Funds, I think, went away 2008-ish. So it used, when it started in like 2002, the year after, like 50% were lottery proceeds. And then I-728, the lottery proceeds were dwindled and diverted somewhere else. And then, of course, when I-728 completely went away, that's when I was reasonably certain that there's no lottery unless it's buried in the state.
Yeah. It's a ton of money.
Yep. Cannabis, I don't believe it's going to us in any, well, nothing obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any questions?
It's a bait and switch.
It is.
Hold until you're done with this slide review.
It sounded so good at the time.
Okay,
but I get
so
it.
the piece, because they're both negatives, those are on the opposite sides of this, so I'm trying to wrap my mind around it. Decreases the staff due to enrollment, so we're cutting 50 FTE, and that saves us $330,000. But we would have been funded $569,000 had we not been required to make that cut, so in all, we lose like $230, like, is that right?
Yes, you do net those two.
Okay,
So enrollment decreases do cost us
okay,
until such time as the overhead also goes away.
okay,
So you have fewer kids, you're gonna have fewer direct supports, teachers and such. But when it's such a minor change, you're still gonna have the full-time librarian and the counselor, so you don't see all the savings when the.
okay,
So yes, we generate roughly 11,000 per full-time equivalent, so that's the 569. 50, I'm just estimating 2 teachers. Now, could it be, could we still have less staff? Sure. Or if the kids don't land in the right places, we might not see that.
okay.
Yeah. Your best guess on how those little minions land.
Okay.
Okay, and because we're looking at another budget deficit. We had an exercise with our district leadership team to discuss potential options. Do you want to start that conversation or?
Sure, what we did, because it was a snow day, we ended up, well, it was a back to school day, but it was close to a snow day, so we did it via Zoom. We put them into Zoom rooms, just to give you a sense of how we did it, with job links. And we asked them to generate ideas. The instructions were be creative, but also keep in mind, our collective bargaining agreements, which they don't know every single one of them. So, they generated ideas. And I asked them to color code those based on whether they were within their sphere of control or outside their sphere of control. So, you couldn't generate all ideas that were like impacted somebody else, but not you. So they did great work and really dove into it. I mean, I think you and I both were, maybe you stayed in your room, but I was going from room to room and just listening to conversations. And they were having really meaningful conversations about this. I thought you were kind of hopping around too. So they came up with some ideas. The long and short of it is we're still quite short of $8.3 million. They didn't come up with $8.3 million worth of ideas. So we had hoped to get Balancing Act out end of this month. The power of Balancing Act is that you do have to choose. You do have to get to a certain point, right? Like you can't just say, well, cut central office and travel. Those are the things that people typically want to cut. You can't just say that and say I'm done. You have to make choices. So I think what we're going to have to do for that exercise is not anticipate that we're going to be able to present enough on that to get to $8.3 million. And we don't really want to start the process of negotiating with employee groups on things like furlough days, on all of that, until we see what the legislature is going to do. And so what we'll probably do is choose a number that is a percentage of all of the cuts we think that are not in contracts, that we could potentially do, and then use it kind of in the same way we did last year as an advisory conversation from our community. Last year was clear, it wasn't a vote, but it was like, where do people prioritize things? And we would do the same thing. So we'll come up with a number based on the types of things we've been able to generate, which don't impact collective bargaining. Last year, if you recall, we took a lot of stuff off the top. We were like at 10.6, I think, initially.
We were at 16 at the end.
Okay, and then we ended up at 10.6. So, teachers gave a day. So that was $1 million that came off. Cabinet gave 100,000, that came off. So we took all those things sort of off the top, and then the Balancing Act conversation was 10.6 million. But there was much more to cut last year. So, at 8, we're at about half of what we were last year. The problem is, it's cumulative. It's on the backs of, we already don't have syncs at every school, and we already don't have 5th grade music. So the impacts become cumulative. So,
COVID masks were made us all forget that we actually cut 17.5 million going into 1920. And then of course, March 20, COVID hit and it delayed further budget cuts for a couple years until the last 2-3 years have been hard.
So when you put this out, it'll be asking, and generally, like we can explain that when you launch the exercise that you make $6 million in cuts, that type of thing, or we keep it at 8.5.
we'll probably say, we'll say that it'll be a long explanation because it's
Right,
complicated.
yeah.
But we're still waiting for the legislature to finish. We'll probably use the same numbers we've been using all the time.
Okay.
We anticipate it's going to be between $7 and $10 million.
Okay.
But for this exercise, we would like you to reach X number of dollars.
And you'll come up with that as a percentage that you were describing.
Yes.
So like for 5, but they'll be clear that it's really a task of prioritization that they're doing.
Right,
Yes.
exactly.
That'll be helpful though.
It will.
It's still helpful.
Everything's helpful.
And as you recall, last year, there were lots and lots of comments, and so
Yeah.
we can glean a lot of information. from the comments as well.
And they'll, again, and hopefully it'll be more obvious to them what it means when something is locked, but there'll still be the locked things on there, so they see the full range of the budget, or the locked thing's not even gonna be there this year.
They'll still be there.
Okay.
Yeah, we can have a conversation about, for instance, if something is in the collective bargaining agreement, maybe we don't lock it to see what the sentiment is.
I
But,
think we'd get, well, not to talk away from, I think we could hit with an unfair labor practice if we started having people
Oh, I mean-
prioritize the.
I mean, not prioritize, but just don't lock it for comments.
Oh, maybe for comments.
For comments, not, I wouldn't say,
I think we
Would you
have, we
cut
have
this
to think
by?
that through, and we have to really think about that with our labor partners, but,
Yeah.
but things like, as a great example, Title I. We can't just increase it, we can't say, well, let's get another $1 million for a Title I from the government, you know, from the federal government. So it's law, and it explains, this is a program determined by your poverty rates, et cetera, and then that, it's locked.
And I think we've said before, but I wonder if it's possible that if we could like, or put them in order, like all the closed things, all the locked things together, like, these things are all locked, but it's good for you to see what's in the budget that's locked. These things are the things you're prioritizing, these are the things where we could add, you know, possible more fees or that sort of piece. Is it possible to do that in terms of the sequence? Okay.
I think the toughest thing was for trying to get responses is I certainly wouldn't even suggest that that something subject to collective bargaining would be any sort of option. What frustrated people was how many categories were locked. And my hope was for people to understand that these are locked for a reason, and this is the reason. But a lot of people didn't read the reason, and they got very frustrated that it was locked. So I haven't quite wrestled how to.
Which is why if they're not mixed in, but they're all over here, and there's a leading in
Yeah,
paragraph.
that would help.
You know, these things are all locked due to one of these reasons.
Well, or due to click on it, and they gave really, really detailed
Well,
reasons
it is, yeah.
about
But it was-
the reason
it was
that every
there.
single one of them was locked.
I don't know why people ignored the little I, but the little I was very helpful.
They'd be like, well, why can't I cut, I mean, some of the comments were, why can't I cut this? Well, we tried to,
Well, it says so right there. but-
yeah, but I don't care, I wanna cut it, so.
Yeah, so do we, but
Yeah, so we'll wrestle with
how to do it.
how to, yeah.
But it probably won't be quite the same exercise as last year, because we just don't have enough to put on the table to get to, I mean, last year we used our best guess of 10.6. We don't have enough to put on the table to get to 8.
But that'll be explained to them, so they understand, we have a bigger deficit than what we even have ideas for. So we can say to them, if you have ideas, give it to us in the comments, so that we, because they might have some great ideas that we haven't thought of.
And some of the things, you know, we're talking about as an example, and some of this still has to be really cost out. So continue to raise rental fees. Well, we haven't completed the analysis of how much did our usage drop through increasing rental fees this year? And if we do it another $5 per field or whatever, how much more will it drop? You know, so there's some analyses we're continuing to put out. I think we talked with the board before about elimination of middle school athletics. It's something we can put onto the balancing act. It's less than you would think, because it's about $445,000, but we collect $130 in fees. So, you know, $315,000, so it's not as much. You know, some of the things like, and some of the things we could put on there in some ways because they're good, like the calendar, I think was a good one. because when people get the calendar or when they get the newsletter, they think, well, you're spending $1 million a year on the newsletter. Well, we weren't, you know, we got it, but we're not spending $1 million on it, and we weren't spending $1 million on the calendar, which we're in the, I don't know, 30 something. So an example of something we can put on there, people say, don't stop transporting the kids to the K-8s. Like, it's gotta be costing you a ton of money to transport to Madrona and Maplewood. And the reality is, with the way, because that's to-from transportation and the way we're reimbursed, it's about $14,000 a year.
It's nothing.
I mean, it's beyond budget dust. It's really almost nothing to provide transportation and an equity step. I mean, if you don't provide transportation to those schools, it's only children whose parents can drive them are going to be able to go to those schools. That's it, you know, for $14,000. And sometimes I like to think of it the opposite. Let's say we didn't have transportation to those schools, and we said, hey, for $14,000, we can make this work, and you can get transportation for every kid to those schools and be much more equitable. I go, hey, that's a bargain. Let's do that, even in a tough budget year, right? So, but we can put it on there, and I think that going back to balancing act, it's an educational tool as in addition to being, or giving us feedback about the budget.
Well, the funny thing about, it's not funny, but, transportation, our challenge is because.
I need a.
I need that. Sorry about that.
I need a budget. To-from transportation, we're reimbursed at about 97%, so it's that 3% that's gonna really start hurting us. But Maplewood and Madrona are no different than, Chase Lake, as far as.
What about transporting the high-tech kids to Terrace Park? Is that also a part of what we consider?
97%, it's basically, yes. The challenge, of course, is in the logistics in the office can be more complicated, but that's hard to define. So, sorry, right before you said that. Oh, the other thing is, we don't have routes, so I, bus driver, don't take kids to Madrona and go home. I go 3 other places, and then 3 other places in the afternoon. So I take kids this school, this school, this school, Madrona, this school home, this school home, this school home, Madrona home. So you stop transporting to Madrona, for instance, what do you do with that driver? You freed up that late tier, you haven't figured out that driver to do anything else except that late tier, if that makes sense. So that's why transportation.
So really, with your blessing, we'll put everything we can find onto that with the understanding that, nothing is written in stone. That will include middle school, athletics, that will include 6th grade music. You know, it's things like safety patrol at elementary is not in any contract, it's $100,000. You know.
Who provides that?
It's to pay the advisors and
The adults who are.
the adults who,
That's like those are classified people, right?
no, teachers usually manage the safety patrol, I think, don't they?
Yeah. What if it were classified instead of certificated, who managed them?
That one is not bargain, that's one of the few activities we have that wasn't bargain.
The rate is established. The rate is established whether you have the activity.
So it doesn't matter who's doing it.
We
just cut the activity stipend altogether, we wouldn't try to just find cheaper labor to do it.
And if you have a classified person, usually if a classified is taking a certificated stipend, the stipend is converted to hours. The harder thing is, a certificated employee can take that stipend, a classified employee runs a risk of getting paid overtime.
But, so,
So
do
what
we need to
about
get us down the
parent-
safety patrol, but
But can it be parent volunteers who would do it instead?
I mean, we have not factored in every single thing we could do to replace or to, I mean, it's just an example of something, it's an example of how deep we've gone to find everything that we're paying any money for that isn't in a contract, that isn't in a collective bargaining agreement required by the state. We've tried to put everything onto these lists. So you're gonna see some things that you're gonna think, well, that's ridiculous, why would you get rid of that? And it kind of goes under the, I think I said in the intro, I even use the thing, I get asked all the time, have you turned over every rock? We're turning over rocks that have $10,000 under them. But we have, I mean, and I think it's really important that people know that.
If that MSAC bill comes through that gives us 20%, do we know what that number is for us? We had a 20% increase?
I think it's like 5.6 million, so
So it would be significant.
yes.
So the
second
10% is
so
roughly
we got the
2.7.
5192, okay.
So I would just,
Change it.
And
as
the other one,
significant.
the other one is 10%.
Right.
So that would be half.
that 2.7 is 5.4.
Yeah.
Not 5.6, Aaron's like,
7 and 7 are 14.
Smile.
Valentine's Day, 2-4, okay.
that's the other tricky thing is,
I know, it's just, it helps us to push, I'm just thinking anything to help push that. It's like,
no,
yeah.
last year, there were really no bills.
Mhm.
That we were watching at this time of year, so we were pretty much like, nothing's gonna come through. Now there's lots of great discussion, the possibility of something by, being very, conservative would say, I think we're gonna get something, but it's not gonna go in the budget. But I do think this year, unlike last year, realistically, I think that's the first time Rebecca's heard me say that. She's been waiting for me to say that.
What were some of the
Bigger crops,
TLT
bigger
ideas
crops.
that came out of the exercise?
So, you know, things we've talked about before, quad concerts,
Yeah.
no field trip transportation. I mean, that one is a little hard to quantify, it's generally paid for by PTAs and fees that covers, kids are covering that. You know, some of it's stuff like, and it is interesting because it illustrates even with our district leaders, some of the misconceptions. So one was sell unused furniture, which I don't know, so there's a conception. So last year we did that, we had $1,091 that we made in a surplus. So I mean, we can sell stuff, but it's not,
It's on Facebook Market or
we have public
Far-reaching.
auctions that, I mean, it is complicated, we have to offer it to other districts first and then,
Yeah.
can come from,
Well, the few times that you've seen the surplus vehicles that Ben has valued at like $350, that's the bulk of it. Furniture, no, the auction place has to be willing to take it.
Oh, yeah.
you know, things like somebody said, close this building in the warehouse and have all, I don't know how we close the warehouse. Cause it's literally a storage thing, have everybody from here work remotely,
Would that say?
And close this building?
and close this building.
No idea, cause that was like, you know, we got this last week and when you're costing, you have to try to think of, well, what does that mean and what if, so,
That'd be horrible, but.
Is there any, are there any more areas that could be covered by the tech levy that aren't currently?
We are scouring that, there were a couple of ideas for that, we're re-looking at those. So there's a couple that we're poking around, those were a couple of ideas we had. Reduce mail distribution frequency, we've already gone from 5 to 3 days, and that's been hard. Eliminate the once a year mailer, we went from 3 to 1.
We need at least one.
I don't disagree,
Already got.
But I bet you'd like it if we just eliminated all the phone service, then you wouldn't have to take any phone calls. That would help your.
similar to doing the tech levy, we're going to analyze whether capital is paying for everything you can. They talked about consolidating schools. Problem is, we don't have enough space to do that. We don't have enough, like, if we closed even our smallest school, we don't have seats for those students in other
Nearby.
schools.
Without shipping them across the district.
Right, eliminate the collaborative literacy process, project,
How much is that?
25,000.
It's all grant funded though.
It's not.
It's all grant.
It's all
funded.
grant.
Oh, it is grant.
So-
Oh, well.
So zero.
So
That's
that's
not we haven't all been through,
Yeah.
you know,
Lydia was scrambling. yeah.
outside sponsors for fields, I see it at other places, put
Yeah.
your signs up.
What was that?
Do what?
Can
Outside
someone
sponsors.
sponsor the fields? Like a
Oh,
business
like
or something?
adopt a
Like
field.
Subaru's field?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Subaru, Chase Orthodontics, whoever wants to put their sign up and,
Dunkin' Donuts Health Center.
sixth grade music,
Boy, the field sponsorship might.
I like
Or
that.
something,
I
yeah.
like that.
I don't think it's
I
terrible.
don't-
I don't know that it's, I don't know that it's an $8 million idea, but.
I don't know, man, that's a free advertising.
I just like it, because then it gets them to like care
I
about
mean, we have
that
had
school
some
and
fields.
going to more things at that school. and-
We'll go to Edmonds Stadium, there's like a big Beresford booth sign there, there's some, I know, so my wife used to work at Beresford booth. We have to sign up. Yeah, so-
Some of our fields already do, yeah.
we
We
have,
do, we were just talking about that.
we have seen a few of them around already, so, you know, so those were a lot of their ideas. Reduce any chosen not related to categorical or tech levy.
So I'll tell you something that came up today. I was at Ace Hardware and they said, would you like to round up and the money goes to Chase Lake Elementary? I said, oh, absolutely. If we all rounded up our 53 cents or whatever.
Can we do that?
I don't know how Chase Lake made that deal
Oh, wow.
with Ace Hardware, but I said, absolutely.
It's probably.
Yeah.
It's what?
Probably
It's
PTA.
Yeah, we can do that.
Lydia, what's the math on how many 53 cents are there in 8 million?
How many people get their barbecue at Ace Hardware?
If Ace Hardware could get us to $8 million by rounding up, they would be very happy.
I don't know, more weddings, more wedding rentals, I don't know.
Get married at the local
Come to this romantic gym. The boardrooms.
Yeah.
Remember your prom? What a great place to get.
Yeah.
married.
We get
Very
married.
niche.
We did have a community, I mean, I do a little bit of experience in that because we had a community rental facility situation in Shoreline,
Yeah.
and they don't make money.
Yeah, I know we talked about this before. I just
Yeah,
don't believe it.
unfortunately, that was, we saved the $100,000 by, or maybe a little more by cutting the staff in that programming. It's a great service to the community that they give rent our spaces, and we were running a conference center, but it wasn't great for the budget.
So I'm gonna play timekeeper here. Is there anything else for the good of the order or other questions or comments? We all know how to reach Lydia
too.
and Rebecca with our wonderful ideas.
Not if they don't have phones next year.
Lydia, thank you so much. I know how hard you've been working, and I want to thank you personally as well for the time you gave me over the weekend for helping to put that analysis together. That was really good. So,
Can I pose one question?
yeah,
Has there been any consideration of recruitment? Because we know what the impact of losing an enrollment is of each student. I mean, each school's PTA recruited two students.
It's hard to overcome the loss of enrollment due to the birth rates. I mean, where we are getting hit primarily with enrollment is there just aren't that many 5-year-olds in Snohomish County right now. We're having smaller numbers of 5-year-olds come in. We do not believe we have lost, if you want to talk about it in business terms, we do not have any reason to believe that we've lost our market share of the kids who are out there. There just aren't as many of them. So we're graduating much larger classes than we're bringing in. And so any recruitment, any opening of boundaries, any, encouraging kids from other districts to attend our schools through boundary variances it's gonna have a minor impact compared to the kindergartners.
Anything else, Tom?
Yeah, we wouldn't necessarily, I understand the falling birth rate, but it wouldn't have to be necessarily kindergartners that we recruit, but, if you don't think would reduce anything, I just think when we're talking, we just went through some things that were like $1,400 or $14,000, well, even getting one kid back would, be almost equal to that, so. Getting one kid who's not in our system.
Yeah, and we have very strict rules around recruiting homeschool children. They are protected by some things where districts can't reach out to them. So, I mean, unless you're talking about out-of-district kids or kids who are going to private schools, out-of-district kids create some complexities if you're actively recruiting other people's students. And we tend to have a net, we are net positive with kids we get. We get a few more kids boundary accepted in than we send out. But those things always happen. You know, a teacher in Shoreline wants to have the same breaks as their child, so they take their child to school in Shoreline. A teacher in Edmonds brings theirs. So I think the best recruitment we can do is having a great school system and encouraging people to want to have their kids here, but we can think about that. I know that there was a company who does that, like a marketing piece, but I've always thought it was a little strange and I never really wanted to engage.
And we'd have to pay them.
And of course, they would have to be paid, right?
Unless we had
Sure.
somebody who was a parent who wanted to donate their time to help do something like that, but we do need to be careful. If I recall, you and I had talked about that, Rebecca, that you can't just go marketing for kids.
Well, and I mean, one of the interesting things is we don't have access to kids. Unless we're going to do a mailer to our whole community, which last year we sent out a kindergarten postcard to say, hey, everybody come register your kindergartner, it's kindergarten fair. This year we're not doing that because we cut kindergarten fair. You know, so we don't have access unless we do a mailer to everyone, to the children in the community. We only have access to the children in our schools in terms of communication and emails, et cetera, the things that are free to us.
We cut kindergarten.
Okay, thank you.
Schools are doing their own kindergarten.
Yeah, schools are still doing their own
Okay.
kindergarten welcomes, but we're not doing the district.
And also tours, kindergarten event and also free tours, so.
Good.
It's gonna go all. I know, I saw your.
Yeah, I was like, oh.
I wanted to add that for you.
Okay, this special session of special meeting of the Edmonds School District Board of Directors is now adjourned, and we will reconvene for the business meeting at 6:30.